What's up YouTube, and welcome to another draw along with me, where today we're going to create this painting aesthetic of a parrot. Now in today's design we're going to go ahead and create a stencil from a bird reference photo here, and we're going to do that manually but with a tile drawing guide system. So each tile, you take a look at sort of a basic shape in each square here and then draw it over here manually. So it's a bit of a step up potentially from tracing if that's all you've done before. It's a in-between between creating from a reference photo completely from scratch or from tracing. It's that nice middle step, and hopefully it'll be something that you may have not done before and you can learn that particular process. But if you are concerned that you may not be able to achieve this, I've provided my stencil in the description down below. I do recommend you try and give it a go, but if you can't do it, it's ready there for you and you can build up to that. Maybe come back to this tutorial at a later date. But as always, there's links in the description down below to this particular canvas itself with the photo in, drawing guide, everything ready to go. And of course, you'll be able to find the palette for today's design as well. And another thing to note is we're not creating this parrot like for like. We're just going to create it based on what we can see here and have some fun with it. If your feathers look slightly different, they look slightly different. That's not the point of this. It's just a matter of building up your confidence in replicating from a reference photo. So have some fun. Be sure to share your designs with me over on Instagram when you're done. If you want even more tutorials like this, these are available over on my Patreon. I'll leave a link in the description down below if you want to get access to my full catalogue of Patreon exclusive tutorials. So apologies for a long intro, but with all that said, let's get started. So once you've downloaded the canvas and of course you've got today's palette, we can get started on creating the design. Now if we take a look at our layers first of all, we've got the reference image on the left hand side, which I've positioned where you need it. And likewise, we've got some textures as well, which are very subtle in this sort of area over here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new layer and we're going to drag it underneath our textures. And this is going to be our sketch layer. We're going to make sure our color is set to black by double tapping at the bottom of the disk. And we're going to go to our brush library, and under sketching, we're going to use the 6B pencil. Now my opacity is currently set to 49%. And size currently is 11%, but we may change that when necessary. Now what we're going to do, this is a very common sort of method in terms of breaking down an image into much more manageable chunks. Now if we take a look at our grid, and if I actually lower the reference image down first, just to give you an idea what we're looking for. The bird itself is split up into 4 tiles across the top. That's what I'm going to refer to them as, tiles, by 6 down the left hand side there. So we've got 4 by 6. And then what you do is you want to work that out as a position here on your grid. Now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We won't go right close to the edge, so we'll use these 4 here on the right hand side down this line here, and we're going to use this space over here. So if I undo that, what we're going to do is we're going to look at each area of the grid and work out where sort of areas go in and out of each tile. As an idea, if we take a look at say this tile here, we're looking for the fact that the back of the bird comes in just a little bit off the top here and it leaves here. And then you can roughly sort of guide your pencil down on the right hand side in a second and break that down as a much more manageable area. Such as here, the only line you would need to draw on your stencil is this area here. Likewise in this tile here, you would just add in this one here. Now to give you an idea what it is I'm looking for before we carry on, is we're looking for basic shapes to get started with. So I can see, for example, there's a big swoop around here in towards the back area there. We then have the shoulder of the wing. So round here, for example, and round here, we have a separate area of your feathers. If we look at the tail, we have this line down here. We have these extra feathers here. Now these are just to show you as an example. And we have this area that swoops up the back. And then of course, the head, we're looking to separate the orange area. We're going to separate this black area. We're going to separate the beak, green, and so on. So you'll end up looking for the same shapes as me, and that's roughly what we're going to try and aim for. Again, sort of in the intro, we're going to keep this nice and loose with the painting style. So once we have undone that, we can get started on cracking on. Now, if you feel like this is going to be a particularly hard stage for yourself, you can download my stencil and it will drop it onto the canvas for you and you'll have it perfectly ready to go for the next stage. You can skip ahead, but this whole sort of process is just trying to aid you and increase your skill set. So if we take a look at the head of the bird to start with, I can see roughly that the beak there comes halfway through. So we're ignoring this column here and we're starting in this square here. So I can see it's roughly halfway through. And so I can just very lightly with my pencil just make a very light dash. And it somewhat makes its way up to just under halfway. So it goes sort of straight and then it just rounds off and goes some way through about sort of halfway. So something a little bit like this. Now, we don't want to match the bird perfectly shape for shape. We're just using it as a guide. If yours looks ever so slightly different, I'm not interested in that. We want to just have some fun and just learn a new process such as this. Now we're going to ignore the face details here for a second until we've completed the whole of the outline. So again, we come in from here, it kind of swoops down and leaves really close into this corner over here. So I'm just going to sort of sketch this out, and we've kept the opacity lower so we can just sort of create some really fine lines to start with, and then we can build up from there and just build up on top once you've got a sort of a much more accurate look for where you want the lines to go. So mine's going to look very sketchy to start with, but it's all about learning and trying to increase your skill set design by design. Now this little bit here, we've got a tiny bit that just runs through the corner, so we can leave that there. In this tile here, so we're going 1, 2, 3 across and then 2 down, so we're here. We're going to run that line through the back there, and it leaves just sort of a third off from the right, so roughly this sort of marker here. And you can leave little dashes, that may help you potentially. So the actual back itself goes in quite a uniformed sort of line down towards sort of this point here. And then we have sort of the back wing. If I zoom in for you, this line here goes down here, and then we have the back wing make its way in, and then that eventually just sort of blends in nicely because of the feathers. So zooming out again, I'm going to go ahead and add that little bump in. It's about midway in that tile. It rounds and then comes back in on itself a little bit, like so. And then we'll just use that line now just to make our way down through the corner here of this tile, and then that just rounds off into this area here as well. So you end up creating the back area there, and then this is just a bit of a curve, so we're just going to continue down through here and just sketch, making our way through. Then we're going to just continue down the back area here of the feathers, so they kind of roll in here, they kind of roll in here, and then this feather here takes over. So we'll try and add that in. So we're going to add in the feathers that leave roughly over here. I'm going to curve that round into there. And then we'll let those other feathers at the bottom take over. And they run somewhat up here. Eventually breaking off and creating a unique feather here. And again, we're just interested in basic shapes. So we're not interested by feather. Now at this point, I'm just going to skip ahead to this line here. We want to identify that one and get that one in. So that's going to roughly run here, and it's going to go right across the corner at quite an angle. And that's going to run all the way off to the edge of the screen. And then we can finish this line off now and just go down towards the edge there. Again, if your feathers look ever so slightly different in terms of layout, not interested, that is perfectly fine. And again, we'll get this line in here now. So we'll just create a bit of a straight line down. It's very straight, that feather, with a slightly rounded one just beside it that runs a little bit wider into that point. And then I'm just going to take a look at this again and just bolden that up a little bit more. Now this arc here, this curve here, is this curve here. And you can see there that that then rolls round and takes over. So we're going to do exactly that. We're going to let that just run through here. It goes all the way up towards the corner, so maybe I'll be better off coming from this angle here into there and then just rolling that round a little bit into there. Something like this. And then I can readjust this line and just let that nicely run under. So if you make any mistakes, just go to your eraser, tap on the eraser, go to calligraphy in the monoline brush, and just get rid of any excess if you feel it's necessary. It's just a sketch stage though, so try not to worry about it too much. I'm just adjusting some of those lines here, like so. Then we're going to go ahead and carry on through into this tile. So we go through this corner and we make our way up to sort of just above the midway point, so roughly here. And then we can see and identify that there's a bit of a shape here. So it's a bit tighter than that. There's a bit of a shape here. And that's those top feathers that sit, of course, above, should I say, these ones here. So we're going to try and bring them in. So I want to start here for a second, which is this tile here is, of course, this tile here. So we're going to bring in that top area. So I'm going to start here and just slowly make my way inwards a little bit more. So it's a bit of an arc. And then we're going to roll round and take over from this line below us. So in fact, there's a feather that just runs a little bit more astray. And then the feathers here take over about 2/3 down in this area here. So I just need to try and just create some sort of feather-like lines that will just take over. And then we have this line here as well. So that's kind of the shapes that I'm looking for. And you're going to have to, of course, go at your own pace. So just take your time, have some fun creating it in this particular style. Now I'm going to continue up here now and just run that round into that area there. So I'm going to go ahead and just run that through here, up towards the edge of the bird, which is right over here. I'm going to have to stretch that out a little bit further. And then I'm going to run it sort of parallel to the back of the bird, up towards here. And then we'll take over again from this area here and create this arc, which will then join the two together. So we'll go up. It takes over the majority of this tile. And I'm going to undo that. I want it to be a little bit more rounded at the top. And just let that roll round into that back area there. So I can nicely identify the shapes from here. And now we're going to draw in the orange area. So that roughly starts about here. And I can see that my line here is arguably a little bit too sort of wide. So I'm going to just adjust that, grab my eraser, because I need to give some space for the orange bit. So you'll eventually see sort of little areas that you think, oh, well, potentially I could adjust that because we have a sort of more of a shape that needs to be fitted in here. And you can see from other shapes that maybe you've made yours a little bit too big. So then this orange runs just into here. So it's just a little bit of orange just in this corner here. And maybe I can reintroduce that line then to take over. And then if we look at the orange area here, it's a bit of an S shape and sort of leaves just up there, which is just up here. So we're constantly looking at the grid, trying to work out where things leave and where things enter a particular part of the photograph. So we're going to go ahead and go up here. I'm going to keep it a bit skinny here because it does get quite close to the wing. And then it's just got to make its way around a little bit more. We need to make space for the face. So a little bit something like this. And then I can see in this tile, we create like a bit of a blob shape. So we're just going to go ahead and create that. Create this blob. And it just makes its way up and around here. And it just leaves again from that tile. And it runs into here. So it actually runs a little bit in behind those feathers of the wing. So a little shape like this. We've then got the black area here as well, which comes in from this corner here of the orange. So we're just going to bring that in. And we've got to make sure we get it nice and round for the face because we've got the white area to add. And then there's a little bit of feather and then it runs into the orange. So we're separating a few different shapes here. Then we need to go ahead and start to look at the face. Now what I think is best to do here is we'll get started on the beak. So from this point here, which was our initial starting point, there's a bit of a diagonal line which just sort of runs across towards here. We'll sketch that in for the moment. And then that kind of loops up in this tile still and then creates a real swoosh down and goes ahead and leaves this tile and rounds off into this shape here. So now your two shapes are sort of joining together to form the white area. So once we've done that, we can then go ahead and look at the bottom of the beak potentially. So that actually curves in and it's roughly just above halfway. So we can just curve in a little bit like so. And again, being a sketch, we can always come back to it and adjust it. Little something like this. And then we'll get the main area of the beak in. So that beak nicely comes round here and it makes its way around underneath that line that we just made. So I'll leave that there for a moment, and then the corner of the mouth here just sort of comes out from there, goes aiming towards that outer line, and then it curves round like so. And then maybe I can readjust this line here just to better link up towards that. And then we can join up the mouth then. So this area here, in fact, goes a little bit wider than there. And then this area here, we've got a nice curve that goes all the way up around our white area. It then makes its way sort of down and curves back on itself ever so slightly, and then kind of flicks back out again, just to create the bottom area of the mouth or the beak, a little something like this. And then you will end up with this little black gap in the middle, which we will just colour in later on. Then we have the eye, so we can see roughly the position of the eye, but we also have the green area as well. So we're going to just draw in the green area. So we're going to go around this white area here. There's a little bit of a bump. And once we've gone round the bump, just draw in that in. We can then go all the way out and make our way basically into this line here. So we do really go up from here. And we go ahead and make our way towards that, like so. Then we've got the green area that we just want to separate from the blue for a second. So we will just refine this area here at the top of the head. And then we can just dash, dash, dash until we get into this area here. So we'll just create a few little dashes that make their way into this area here. Again, it's just rough. We just want to sort of get the basic shapes in. Then, of course, again, we've got the eye. So the best practice with an eye most of the time, of course, is to just sort of draw in a circle as in sort of a guide, and then try and work off of that a little bit more. So if we take a look at the eye, it's not a perfect circle. If I was to outline that, it very much has this little corner here and nice big bulge at the top. So we'll undo that and we'll go ahead and take a look and get that in. So we will create the corner, we'll go round up towards the top, and then it kind of curves round on itself again and makes its way in towards that corner there. Let's just get some very rough lines in here of the face as well. So this one here starts just underneath in this tile. It cuts across the corner and then it makes its way over and into the black area. We then have space for 3 more lines, and don't worry if you can't squeeze them in. In the practices for this myself, I've never managed to get all 3 in. So just don't worry about it too much, don't stress. So it goes all the way around this corner and over to here. And then we've got one more line that's up here and makes its way under in towards sort of a corner area here. They're just rough. Each bird obviously would have different markings anyway, so just bear that in mind. And then I'm just going to draw in some random lines here just to sort of give me an idea later on. And then we've got this sort of more pronounced area just here on the end. So I can see from my beak, I just need to refine that shape a little bit more. So I'm actually going to sort of bring that round and a little bit more upwards into there, just making it a little bit longer in this area. And in fact, I may even just erase this and adjust it. So I'll keep it in the video for you, just so you can see sort of an idea as to what I'm looking for. So curve that round just a little bit better. It really does have quite a long area at the end, a little bit more like this, and then we have that nice dark area in there. And now zooming out, we've roughly got all the shapes that we need. The only thing I want to try and sort of make a bit more apparent is just this area here, so I'm just going to round that off a bit more. And we have the yellow area that runs down the back, so we're just going to sort of break that off a little bit here and let that just run down in towards here. And then the angle of some of these feathers as well are roughly in this sort of idea, this sort of angle. And likewise these ones here, you can start to, if you want to at this stage, just maybe sort of draw in some guidelines for angles. So this will just help you sort of identify which way the feathers are moving. And then we know from here, everything sort of spirals out from this point up here on the shoulder and makes its way down. And we have some nice feathers making their way outwards from here. So just a few extra areas of sketch. Likewise, we can draw in the log now as well. So that comes in all the way from up here. So we will get that added in. And like the log, for example, there's no stress needed over a log. If it doesn't go perfectly through the tiles, who cares? It's fine. We're just trying to get a basic in there. No one's going to comment on, oh, your log doesn't look very good or accurate, because eventually we're not even going to use the photograph, especially towards the end. We're not going to share this on Instagram with the photograph. It's not necessary. It's just a thing that we're using to learn a new skill with our little tile effect. So that is my final sketch for the Parrot. Now, again, if you want to, you can download this if you're not quite happy with yours. What I also recommend then is once you're happy with it, just quickly go to your layers, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Tap on the top one, for example, and use the option of invert. That will change your lines to white for a moment. And then if you want to, you can drag it all the way in your layers, all the way up to the very top. So just hold down on the layer and drag it all the way to the very top. And then grab your cursor and just move it perfectly horizontal and over towards the photograph and just see how well of a job you did. This is a really good way of just judging maybe where potentially you've made things a little bit too big, or potentially you may want to go ahead and adjust certain areas, but try to just stay true to what you drew and potentially learn from it in terms of if we position that there. When I get towards the painting stage, I know I can be a bit more expressive in this area here because the lines do stray a little bit further. The shoulder, I've probably on the back there, the other wing should I say, has probably been exaggerated a little bit too much. So again, I can remember that for later on and maybe not quite fill that in. Other than that, I'm very happy with how things have been laid out. We're not going to add the claws in. I think they're an unnecessary detail. But that's just a way of evaluating how close you were to the reference. And if you're going to continue to practice this method, I recommend that you do that every time. And I will 100% be confident in the fact that once you start to confidently and accurately, repetitively line them up perfectly to the grid on the other side, you'll eventually feel so confident that you may even want to turn off the grid and feel like you could accurately do it on a canvas without the grid. So that's just part of that progression curve that we can move on. I'll delete that white one on the left now because we're done with it. And now we're going to get into the actual painting stage. So if you skipped ahead at this point, you'll be ready from this area here. So we've got our stencil, we're going to create a new layer and we're going to drag it underneath the layer there for our stencil, and we're going to add in a bit of a wash. Now I'm going to lower the opacity down of my stencil just down to about sort of 40% for a moment. And on the blank new empty layer at the bottom, we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the middle color here in the first column. We're going to go to our brush library and we're going to go ahead and go to water, and we're going to use the wash brush. Now at this point you're probably thinking, well, if we're adding a background in that's brown, how come the actual design is green and blue? I'll show you how we progress, because I wanted to just show you how we're going to obviously be able to replicate the colors in this photograph, but a few tricks on how, if you want to adjust the look of a design, how easy it is to do it. So I'll show you exactly that. Now my opacity set to 40%. Size wise for the minute, that's a bit too small. We could probably go up to about 13%. And working in the same sort of range of tiles, we're just going to go ahead and just add in a bit of a wash all the way through the back. You'll start to see some of that texture come through, and you can start to maybe darken up certain areas. I do recommend if you can get a little bit of color just around the bird, that will look great later on. And don't worry about the edges too much because we'll come back to them later on. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to just jump to the bottom color in that column. So the first column, I'm going to reduce the brush size down to about 8% and just try to add in some random areas of background. We're not interested too much. We just chuck in some color in. This is just going to be background content that's very blurred out in our particular design anyway. Then go to your colors and grab the middle color in that first column and chuck in some more in certain areas, and try not to go too crazy. My pressure is very, very light at this stage. We're just trying to block in a rectangle of sort and some lighter patches, some darker patches, and just creating that really nice watercolor-ish kind of painting style. So as I said, I don't particularly like the fact that this is a brown background, and I think based off of my practices, it actually looks better if we add some sort of green tones. So an easy way to do this is, if you want to just completely change your design, you can just go to your adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness, and you can use this slider here to adjust the colors, and it will find a different hue in the spectrum. So we want a nice green color, so we're going to drag it to about sort of the 69% mark, or 68 roughly there. We could increase the saturation, that would make it much more green. We could drop that up a little bit more, punch it up a little bit more to about 60%. And if you need to, you can lower the brightness, you can increase the brightness. And I'm going to leave the brightness at 50%. And then I'm going to tap on my adjustments when I'm done. Then what I'm going to go ahead and do is go to my selection tool. I'm going to use the freehand option and make sure color fill is turned off. It needs to look like this. It should not be blue. And then we're just going to create a bit of a random shape up here in random selection and tap on the dot when you're done. So something like this and tap on the dot. Then go to the option of feather. We're going to feather that out. So I'm going to go up to about sort of 24, 25%. Then we'll go to our adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness. And we can change the hue of this area up here that we just made. And maybe we want to change this to a bit more of a blue color. So we could drop or increase that up to about the sort of 74% mark. We can again adjust the saturation, we can lower it up and down or bring it up and down. And we can of course increase the brightness, make that up and down as well. So I'm going to leave mine around about the 55% on brightness. My saturation is set to 66 and my hue is set to 74. And at the minute, I feel like that, well, if we increase this a little bit more actually, let's go up to about that 78, 79. That just gives us a bit of a sky color back there. And then tap on your adjustments when you're done and your selection tool. And just to sort of wash that all in a little bit better, you can go to your smudge, tap on the smudge and go to the option of wash. Your opacity, you want to bring that down a little bit to about 40% again. Size doesn't really matter, about 15 is mine. And we can just sort of blend them together a little bit more. You might not notice too much of a change, but we are just very lightly washing them into one another, and we can push them down. You'll end up creating nice little white patches in the background as well. So I'm just kind of create a bit more of a wash between the two colors. It's very faint, but it's just that little extra touch. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is move on to the actual bird. So this process is not going to be so much do the wing, then move to here, and we're done. It's going to be a process of blocking in some color, coming back to it and refining color later on. So we're going to go ahead and let's make that a little bit bigger. Let's go to our layers. We're going to create a new layer above the background. You could have done it on one layer, but I feel like based off the effects that I want to add at the end, we want to separate it. Plus we have the luxury of digital art, so we can go ahead and make any adjustments we want. So we're going to go ahead and go to our colors, and we're going to get started by blocking in some of the colors of the bird. So the first color I want to grab is the top of the second column. I want to go to my brushes, and underwater we're going to use the wet sponge. The opacity is set to 65% and the size is going to fluctuate, but really around about that 2 to 3% mark. And we're going to zoom in and we're going to get started on the beak. Now I already know where the colors are going, so you don't need to look at the reference for this. And we're just going to block in some color. Now try to do it all with one brush stroke. And also bear in mind, the harder you press, you're going to get something much, much bigger. And the smaller you press, you're going to get something a lot lighter and smaller. So a good average amount of pressure, and we're going to draw in the beak. So although we're using the watercolor brushes, we're not going to be sticking to that watercolor aesthetic quite so much. It's a matter of just using the brushes that I feel when I was practicing with this look quite nice, give us a nice amount of just skills to mess around with. So I'm just going to block that in like so, leaving a slightly darker edge on the left, but we want to make sure it's a bit consistent. Now, if you keep going over it and over and over it, it'll get really, really dark, but we don't want to build up to that at this stage. So try to do it in one motion, as I mentioned earlier. And then we'll also do the bottom area of the beak. So in here, I'm going to just draw that in here. One big wash to start with. And then you can reduce your brush size down from the 3 down to a small 2%. And we can get really detailed in terms of just making sure that the shape doesn't spill too much, and we're happy with the filling of it. I'm going to round that off at the bottom a little bit more, and I can see of course we have this really big area here which we're going to have to just make the top area of the beak a little bit bigger, just a little bit, and then in there we're going to go ahead and just darken that up quite a bit. So we'll go to perfectly black at the bottom of the disc, and we're going to press quite firm here, and probably need to go on top of yourself a few times and even reduce your brush size down to about 1% and get that all filled in black. So we're at this point we're very much sort of drawing, not painting really. So we're just blocking that in, making sure that that's nice and dark. We have got highlights later on which will separate this bottom beak, so don't worry about it if it gets a little bit lost at this stage. We're then going to move on. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this pinkish tone, the top of the fourth column. Brush size wants to go back to about 2%. And we're going to block in the face. So the face is all of this area here, ignoring the area of the lines and whatnot, and you want to block all that in. Again, I'm using it all in one brush stroke. I'm going over the eye, that's fine, and we're going around in these segmented areas that we have created. So blocking that in, and because it's all on one layer, just be careful not to go over the top of anything else, but go right up to the line though. A little bit of spillage outside into an empty area is fine at this stage. Then we're going to go to our colors. We'll grab this green here at the that is the sixth column in the middle, and we're going to block in that green area here above the top of the head, and get back really close to your face colors. We don't want to leave any gaps between our painting. And then once you've done that, we'll change our color. We'll grab this color here. It's the bottom of the fifth column, and we're going to get the oranges in, which is this area here. So at this point, very much just filling it in. So we're blocking in that color here. And a little rule with something like this, you want to start with somewhat the darker tones and then come back to it and build on top of it with lighter tones. That way, the colors that we're adding in now, because we're working with feathers, will act as sort of shadows later on. Then we're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the dark tone again at the bottom here of the third column. And we're going to darken up this area here. Now this wants to be a little bit darker, especially on the left hand side, because we need to separate it from the beak. So we're just going to get really close, maybe darken that left edge up a little bit, but not run into the mouth and the beak. You can see there I'm also somewhat running over and into the orange, just a little bit, because we're going to end up having a nice overlap between these two areas later on anyway. So we want to just block that in, and there we go. We've got that area segmented. Now we're going to move into the main body of the bird. Now if we take a look at the photograph, which now I can actually bring the opacity back up to 100%, we can see that there's a much brighter blue on the back. We then move into this teal color, and then we get into this blue color. Now what we want to do is we want to get the undertones in first. So really, if you were to break this down, you're looking for this color, you're looking for this dark blue here. These tones will come later. Again, with feathers, you want to start off with the darker tones, and then we'll build on top with the lightest feathers. So we can keep the parrot on the left if needs be. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to go ahead and grab this color here. It is the middle color in the second column from the right. And we're going to block in all the way around the top of the head and all of this area here as well. So making my brush size around about that 2 to 3 mark. We're going to go around the top of the head, trying not to leave our line work too much, and also not sort of worried that the two are going to touch, the green and the blue. We'll come round the back of the orange, and again, you can sort of blend them on top of each other, and you can see I'm kind of doing this all in one motion to start with, blocking that color in, and then we'll make our brush size a bit bigger, maybe about 6 or 7%, and we'll really block it in for this area of the wings. And again, trying to do it all in one brush stroke to start with, and then you can go back over certain areas once the color has sort of diluted itself off a little bit. So blocking that in, and we're really going to make sure that this does have a good amount of color, because again, these are our shadow tones that we're kind of adding at this stage. I'll undo that bit there, although I remember I can go a little bit more astray from the overlapping that we did earlier on. I can add some of those in there. I'll undo that one. Just make sure that goes round to our stencil. And I'm actually going to want to make sure that we just bring this blue down here a little bit more. So making my brush size about 9%. I do want to just bring this blue just over here, and definitely all the way to the back as well, because again, we're going to add those really beautiful bright blue tones on later on. So we're going to bring that down to about here. That's fine with me. And likewise, we'll just tidy up the back there. And then we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to grab this blue at the bottom of the fourth column from the right. So my brush size now, it wants to be about 5%. I want to be a bit more accurate, and we're just going to run in the lines as they were on our stencil. We created them in a particular direction. So any sort of extra sort of layering on top will sort of aid towards the angle and the movement of the feathers, because they are going in a particular direction. I'm just going to block that in a little bit more, making sure that this area has no sort of white areas, because it's quite a dark area. and pushing the lines constantly in the direction that they should be going, as I mentioned. And then what we want to do is go ahead and carry on underneath with the tail. So about 4 or 5%, we're going to push in these extra feathers that make their way down this way, blocking them in. And somewhat a bit of separation here is fine. Just as an idea, you can kind of draw in more of those lines above and let them end here. That creates that little curve effect of the changing colours. We're then going to go to our colours again, and we're going to grab this colour here, the middle colour in the second column from the right, and add in these feathers down here. Again, they kind of run in this direction and they make their way underneath that blue that we were just working with. So we want to make sure we don't really run over the top of them too much. And a little something like this. And then we're going to go ahead and add in a little bit of the gold tones. So we're going to go to our colours and grab this colour here, the bottom colour in the second column from the right. We do need to make our brush size a bit smaller, about 3%, and then looking at our stencils, you may want to increase your stencil up a little bit. I can see that the orange runs here and makes its way up towards this sort of point here. So I can always overlap it later on, but I'm going to just streak in some of the yellow tones back there. And there are a few that just make their way a little bit higher. If we take a look at the bird, you can see that they actually run up into this tile here, which is just up here. So you can just block in a tiny bit of those lovely gold colours back there. And they run all the way down because there's another feather just here. So we'll block that in as well. And again, you can see mine's not going to be 100% accurate to this one. And that's the whole style of this as well. It's nice and loose. So what we're then going to do is go to our colours, and we're going to grab this bottom colour in the second column, or fourth column, sorry, from the right. And our brush size wants to be around about that 2 to 3% mark, because we're just going to add in some dashes in the direction. I'm going to make that a bit bigger, about a larger 4%/5%. And we're going to add some dashes in the direction that those feathers are going. These are going to act as possible shadows in the background. So add in some dashes here and there, and some extra areas of dark blue, which if they appear later on will look great. They will just act as little areas of shadow between our feathers. A little something like this will do the trick. So that is what we should roughly be ending with. I'm going to block this in a little bit more colour. And that's what we should be ending with at this particular part of the design. Now what we'll do is we'll get into refinements, and we're going to start with the beak area. So with the beak area, we can go ahead and nicely fill in a lot more of the colour and make those lines on the face a lot more accurate, and we'll do the eye as well. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the top colour in the second column. Brush size wants to be a bit smaller. We're going to stick in about a 2% range at this point, and we're going to darken up the beak a little bit more, because it is much darker just here as it makes its way towards the face. So I'm just going to darken that up, add in that in the darkest area there. I want to make sure that that area in there is very dark. And then the beak over on the right needs to be a bit darker as well. So we're going to blend in from the right to the left and try and add in some much more defined darker colours, and be brave with chucking that colour in. And then we're going to define that bottom edge of the beak as well. So adding in this colour here, darkening that up. You can see that I'm really building up those colour and getting quite close to that edge, which we'll bring out later on anyway. We're then going to go to our colours, and we're going to grab the colour underneath it in the second column. So it's the middle colour in the second column. And we're going to introduce some of these browns, and they kind of make their way around this area of the beak. If we were to identify them, they actually kind of go around here, and then they make their way up here as well. There's a bit of brown in there too. So if we take a look at the area that we need to add it in, we'll add in some down here, down the top area, and we'll add in some, just a little bit of brown tone in the right hand side as well. And that needs to kind of make its way down towards the corner of the beak too. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is go to our colours, and we're going to grab this colour here at the top of the fifth column. This is really going to help us now highlight this beautiful shiny edge. So take a look at that shiny edge, and you can see it kind of follows just a little bit inwards from the edge, and I'm just going to draw that in like so. And immediately you start to reveal that shape much more. It looks much more realistic. We're going to go down into the corner of this edge of the beak here. And then this edge here has a much lighter line that just follows along here. And likewise, just at the very top here. So we're going to go ahead and make our brush size very small, and we're going to draw both of those in. So we're going to bring our brush size down to about 1%, and we're going to really brighten up this top line here, right at the edge of the beak, and brighten that up as it makes its way up into there. And then we're going to go ahead and go down this edge here, and following our stencil, I can just about see it on my screen. So if you can't, just either invert your stencil or increase the opacity back up. And then when you zoom out, you should now be able to identify those areas much more, and they should have this really pretty look to it where we've got these really nice highlights on them. One thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to make my brush size a bit bigger, about 3%, and give 1 or 2 light coats over the top left area of the beak. So just a very light one just here either side, just to kind of blend out that highlight a little bit more. I don't want it quite so like a shiny reflective highlight. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is, what you can do at this stage is start to think about refining your shapes. If we turn off our stencil, we can see here the edge of the beak. If you want to, you can go to your eraser and tap on it, and I would use the water area and the wet sponge. Make your brush size quite small, around 2%, and then just maybe just tidy up some of the line work. So maybe just sort of sharpen up your shapes a little bit more where you feel is necessary. If there's a little bit too much spillage of the brushes that we've used, you can just tidy up the edges of your shapes. So that's something to bear in mind as we go. Now I'm going to bring back in the stencil for a second, because we're going to work now on the face. So we have a brighter tone to add in, but we also have these dark lines. So if we've already done our stencil correctly, you should already have the lines. So we're going to make sure we're on our bird layer. We've got the line work in there. So we're going to go to our colors and grab the top color here in the second column. Brush size wants to be very, very small, about 1%, and we're going to start to draw them in. So mine are pretty accurate to the photograph, so I know I can basically sort of trace over the top of these and let that black line here run in towards the neck area. So it's quite a big line, and it runs in. Now I'm also sort of zigzagging my pen a little bit to create less of a uniformed line and a little bit more of like a feathered look to it. So I'll block in the basic line to start with, up towards here, and then just give the odd little sort of zigzag over the top of it. We'll then also go underneath the eye as well, and trying to just lead all my lines in towards a point. So we're going to go up, around to here, and then that doesn't even make its way towards the edge. So a little something like this. And then at this stage, I can also see, just before I carry on, that this corner of the mouth here just needs to be a little bit higher. So I'll just go ahead and just add that in, just so you don't think I've adjusted something without letting you know. I'm just going to bring that a little bit higher in towards there. Then we're going to go ahead and add those lines in here. So we've got a nice dark line here on the end of the sort of nose area. And then we've got some more lines that make their way that we've stenciled in, and they don't have to be perfect or to the actual count of those. You can spend as much time as you want on them, but we just want to sort of give off the impression. Again, we're not really creating the exact same bird, we're maybe just creating the species of bird. So there we go, we've got some nice line work in there. Now we need to go ahead and take a look at the eye. Now if we take a look at that, it's got a beautiful outline. Look at that around the outside into this beautiful pupil there as well. So we're going to go ahead and add that in. Now what we want to do is we want to hold our finger down and grab the yellowy tone here. It's like a gold tone. If you want it and you're not quite sure, you could use this color here, down here, fairly close to it. So you could tap on there and just drag that in to the left a bit more, so it's a little bit desaturated. So grab that one and just drag it into this point here. And we're going to go ahead and just block in the whole of the eye with that gold look, and then we're going to darken it up. Now I can see my eyes a little bit low, so for a minute I'm just going to carry on as we should be and just draw in the yellow and fill in the eye from our stencil. Make sure it's nice and solid, and we can move it in a second. So this is something else I can teach you in this particular design, is if there's something out of place, how you can maybe rectify it. So we've got the eye in. We can then go ahead and go to our colors and grab the dark tone at the top of the second column. And all we need to do is add in a beautiful dark outline, bulge this out a little bit on the left, and add in the pupil. So we're going to go ahead and take a look. We're going to outline it first of all. So we're going to go around it, make sure we cover all of that yellow. Go around it, and I'm going to try and make that bulge out on the left. Like so, and then down into that sort of point. So around here, just going to increase that area up there a little bit more. And then try to just sort of blend it a tiny bit. So just very lightly with your pressure, just sort of forcing it inwards a bit more. And then taking a look, we want to add in the pupil. So it's fairly large and it takes up the majority of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and add one in. Again, doesn't need to be pixel perfect to the photograph. We're just adding in a pupil like so. And then I'm actually going to reduce my brush size to a very small 1%, just so I can really darken up the edge here of the eye. We want to make sure that's lovely and dark and it's got a really nice defined edge to it. Something a bit more like this. Now at this stage, before we progress on, we're just going to grab our selection tool. For me anyway, this may not affect you. And using the freehand option, I'm just going to go around it to draw around it in the white area. Tap on the dot, grab your cursor and just move it. I need to move mine a little bit higher towards that edge. And then I can go ahead, move it over to here, tap on my cursor when I'm done. And then the gap there that we've made, just go back to this top color here in the 4th column. And we can just paint that in again. So painting in that gap. Try not to disrupt any of the work we've already done. We just need to make sure it's nice and solid though. So we're going to go in here, fill that in. Make sure we've got that lovely pinkish tone in there. And there we go. We've got the parrot's eye. And what we'll do while we're at this stage as well, we're going to go ahead and go to the color just beside what we're working with at the minute, that little pink color. So it's the 5th color on the top row. Brush size around that 1 to 2% mark. And we're going to create a very light circle of light up here. It's going to start off very, very light, and then you kind of want to just add in a good amount of pressure and keep building it up. Potentially even reduce your brush size down to like a 1% and press really, really firm and continue constantly. I'm tapping now at this point, just trying to add in a really nice reflective look in the top of the eye, which to me looks awesome. You keep it quite realistic by keeping it a little bit more faint. You don't want to add in like a bright white dot. Makes it a bit too unrealistic. So there is the face done for a moment. We're then going to progress on to the green area. So I'm going to go to my colors and grab this color again at the top of the 2nd column. And the actual bird itself, if I move across and take a look at the photo, we've got this little bulge here, and you can see there's like a dark edge between the green and the actual face. So we're just going to very lightly chuck in some color. So we're going to go ahead and add that in here. So potentially turn off your stencil if it's getting in your way. You can't really see your shapes too much. And that 1 to 2% range, I'm just going to add in quite a dark line really, but we will overlap it again with more greens. So I'm just trying to create those shapes a bit more. And then I'm just going to create some flicks upwards, up and into the green. And again, they're going to act as really nice areas of shadow. So just dashing in some extra darker areas, that will really help separate the face as well. Then we're going to go to our greens. So we've got these 2 colors here. We're going to grab the green again in the 6th column, middle color. Reduce the brush size to about 1% and create some nice flicks of green up and over onto the blue. And then just let that sort of fade out towards the green. And then go over the top of those dark areas, that dark line we made, just blocking in some green to sort of take over from it a little bit. Then we'll go to our colors. We'll grab this color here just beside it. So it's the 5th column, middle color. And this is going to act as almost like a highlight. So we'll create some flicks of this other color on here as well. So just flick, 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 keeping it nice and loose. And they're going to act as our sort of mid-tone, maybe a highlight tone. And when we zoom out, should have a nice amount of color up there. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is go to my green again, the main color, and just push a little bit more out in towards the blue, just a tiny bit, because we're going to go ahead and work in that area shortly. And then what you can always do is go back to your darker tone again, so the top color in the 2nd column. We can go back into this area and then reintroduce some shadows with a 1%. So just a couple of little random areas here, maybe not quite as bold as that, but just a few little flicks, and they will just reintroduce some shadows back in, which will just help you define some more of the shapes. And likewise, if you really need to, you can get in here and really get quite granular with the details. Then what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and work on this orange area here while we're sort of in that head area. So going to our oranges, we've got a few extra tones here that we can use. And we started off with this one here, and then we've got this bright orange and the red as well. So we're going to grab our base color again. It's this color here, it's the bottom of the 5th column. And we're going to go ahead and start flicking some of the orange up and outwards a little bit, just to create more of a feathered look to it. And round here, the shoulder really is dominant, so we don't need to flick anything out from there. And then down here, I'm just going to make sure that that's a bit more solid with color. Then we just want to go ahead and just make sure this area here has got a good splash of color, a couple more flicks and dashes. Then go to your colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this more brighter red tone, so the bottom of the 6th column. Brush size is about 1 to 2%. And in this area around here, we take a look at the photograph. This area here has a really reddish tone, and there's a couple of red tones here and here. They're kind of the shadowy tones. So if we take a look over here, we're going to flick in some of the sort of more red tones. I'll zoom out for you. So we're going to go ahead and create some dashes of the red in these areas here. And then the odd little splash of this red as it makes its way down into here. And then the odd area here as well. So a few dashes, a few just little areas of shadow for a moment. And then we'll go to our colors and we'll grab the nice brighter tones at the bottom of the 4th column. And we'll prioritize this area here. So there's more of an orangey tone here with a brighter edge to it. And also a few dashes that run into the black area. So we will make sure we try to create a natural blend between them. So I'm just going to create some flicks here. So my brush size is about that very small 2% / large 1%. And we're just going to create some flicks of this orange in this area. So little flicks making their way outwards. And then again, down here, creating some that run right up to the edge here, right up to the edge. Somewhat even in towards the blue, because we'll overlap the blues in a minute. And then we'll reduce our brush size down to about 1% and create some dashes of orange that run over the top into the dark area. So that will just create much more of a natural blend between the two areas of feather. Then we'll go ahead and work in that area. So we'll go ahead and grab this color here at the bottom of the 3rd column. And we're just going to simply darken it up, but also overlap a little bit into the oranges. So for here, for example, we're just going to create a few little flicks outwards that are just going to overlap on top of the orange tones and overlap some of those oranges we added in. They're not the final orange tones. By overlapping, you're going to create a much more built up area. And we also want to make sure this is a little bit darker as well, because my particular wash is very light at the minute, and this is quite a dark area of feather. So we're just going to continue just a dash, 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 really colour that in. And at this point, I'm somewhat sort of drawing more so than dashing. I want to block that all in and create a few more little random feather flicks here towards the bottom. So just a few that maybe stick out a little bit more from the ones around it. Making our way up towards the face and in towards the orange. So you should have a little bit something like this. And from there, we can also go ahead and darken up this line here that runs back into the face, because now we've got kind of our final black color here. We've got much more of an understanding as to the color that's required. So we can run that back into the face and maybe even darken up some of these lines again. So it's a back and forth process. And by going over these lines a little bit with a little bit more pressure and a slightly darker tone, you'll leave greys and dark colors in there, which is going to actually help you quite a bit pull off that natural randomness look to it, because they are not going to be quite like a solid line. They're going to have nice variety in there. And this line here just needs to run all the way up towards the orange area. So next, what we want to go ahead and do is work on the blue areas. So let's go ahead and first of all go to our layers and turn on our stencil again, just so we can see where the shoulder shapes are. We're going to go to our colors, and first of all, we're going to go ahead and grab that dark tone at the bottom of the 4th column from the right again. And we're going to create some dashes of dark area in here. So my brush size is about 2%. I just want to create some much more sort of purposeful shadows in here. So dashing in the direction of the feathers that they're going in. And this will again help our brighter tones also stand off, but also help create some much more depth in this area. So dash, 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 until we get to this shoulder joint here that you can see. So dashing them in, coming down the back there and down into the actual back itself. So much more defined area of shadow. Then we're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab the middle color in the third column from the right. And we're going to add in some of the brighter tones that sit on top. So we're just going to dash in the direction that they're going in. So pressing with a bit more sort of pressure to create some larger shapes, really. I'm going to just dash in these directions, chuck in some color, get quite close to the oranges. You can overlap them as well, because then they get that little nice transition of like a bit more of a greeny hue to them. And we're going to just push these down towards the back and towards that top shoulder area as well. So dash, dash, dash. And when you zoom out, you get much more of an impression for what it is we're trying to achieve. So just a few dashes of this blue down the back on top of those darker tones, and they will act as the feather's shadow. What we also need to now do is this shoulder area. So we want the shoulder to be nice and dominant. If we take a look at it, it really does fill out this whole area. And this area here of color, this here, we're going to come back to right at the end. These are the nice bright tones. So they kind of spiral out from a crown almost there. So we're going to go ahead and just create dashes outwards from here. So just flicking in those directions, following the lines of the feathers. So creating dashes, and now I'm creating quite big lines. I'm creating kind of bigger lines, and dash, dash, dash. I may even increase the brush size up to about sort of 4% and start to really push some larger shapes of feather out towards the edges a little bit more, like so. And you can see that's a really good example of what I'm trying to achieve. I'm just pushing them out, following the direction of the bird. And obviously our feathers are not going to be perfect to that one there. That's not what we're trying to achieve either. So we're going to continue to push these feathers down. We're going to look at the parrot on the left though, of course, and try and, you know, use it as a guide. That's what it's there for. That's what the whole purpose of this is. And then we've got these ones that come down the back. So we've got one that kind of really dominates here. Again, use your grid as to where to position that. We've got another feather here that's quite prominent. I'll add in some dashes on the back, much smaller though. May even come back to that later on. And then we'll fill in this final gap with some more feathers, just making their way out from that kind of crown point. And this is what I was referring to earlier. We've got these dark tones now in between our feathers, which are going to give us our shadow tones. So we're adding in that beautiful blue color on top. Next, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a look at the gaps that we made, and we're just going to go to our colors, and we're going to grab the dark blue at the bottom of the fourth column from the right, and we're going to add in some purposeful shadows. So everywhere you kind of got a gap in between your blades or most of your feathers, we're just going to dash in some darker areas. And take a look at the bird, of course. There's shadows in here where feathers are laying on top of one another. They're creating darker areas, so we're creating some beautiful dashes and like almost like outlines of some feathers. So just dashing in the gaps, pretty much almost all the gaps up towards your crown area at the back here. And I say the crown, that's kind of like your hair would. It comes from a crown on the top of your head most of the time, the very back. And then we'll go ahead and just add in some more shadowy tones in between, just creating more depth in between these areas. But don't stress about it too much, and especially in this area up here, we just need to kind of identify that there's a bit of a darker area here, which is just there, where there's lots of feathers just maybe laying on top of one another. So just dashing that in and adding in some underlying shadows from there, and chucking in some beautiful dark tones in our feathers. So something a little bit like that will do the trick. So then we're going to go ahead and carry on down here. So we just need to darken up just underneath some of these a little bit as they nicely sit on top. So a few extra shadows towards the bottom area will do the trick. Then go to your colours and grab this blue just beside it, the bottom of the third column from the right. And there's lots of sort of long lines of feather. So we're just going to introduce some of this beautiful blue colour on the top here. And that's just going to act as the feathers. I'm pressing quite firm now to create like a nice wide feather here, because that's just there. And we'll create another one just at the back here, and then maybe just run that shadow just in there a little bit more, just to transition them a little bit better. And then we can go back to this color here, the middle color just above it. So the third column from the right, the middle color, and just exaggerate some of these feathers on top of that. What that will do is that will just make sure that we know that these ones nicely sit above those final blue colors underneath. And we just go ahead and just emphasize them a bit more. And what we can also do is go back to our colors. I'm going to grab the bottom of the fourth column from the right and just emphasize a little bit more of that shadow on the back here. So just a little bit of a darker color and into here too. Now, before we carry on, we will go ahead and work down into this area here. So we're going to use this dark color that I'm still working with. So it's the bottom of the fourth column from the right. We're going to introduce some of these feathers here. So being very sort of particular with where you add it, we're going to add in this big feather here. It runs to about there. And we've got one more sort of very dominant feather that runs into this area here too. But we can add in the odd little random streak that's going to be another feather fairly close. And we can definitely darken up this area at the back using this color and building it on top of itself. And likewise, we need to add some shadows into here too. So we're going to go ahead now and go to our colors and grab the bottom color in the third column, because we also need to add some separating shadows into here as well. So like in your gaps, we can nicely just emphasize some of the gaps between them and also just emphasize that back shadow a little bit more. Like here, we've got a very, very dark shadow that just runs down towards the back and over the top of this gold as well. So the gold will come down here and just laying that on top. We then have this area here as well. So we're going to go to our colors and we'll grab this color here. It is the middle color in the second column from the right. And same principle, just add in some lines that run down in the direction that the photograph shows us. And there too. We've got highlights to add at the end, so we can bring them back to life a little bit more towards the end. And again, we're going to go to our colors and grab that top color in the second column. And we'll just dash in some shadows under here too, separating some of these lines, and likewise adding in some shadows just in here as well. We're keeping it very, 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 very loose. Then what we're going to do is add the log. Now we do want to set this on a separate layer, so we're going to create a new layer and drag it underneath our parrot. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab these two colors here. So we'll grab the top color in the second column. We will just block that in. And again, it doesn't really matter too much. I'm actually going to make my brush size a bit bigger though, to about 5%, and just block this log in. It's going to run nicely underneath the parrot because it's on a separate layer. You don't have to worry about it running in. And when you get up towards the edge of our sort of isolated area, we will come back to that later on. Try not to just run it all the way out over here. Introducing the log back there too. Then we'll go to our colors. We'll grab the brown underneath it. Reduce the brush size down to about 3 or 2%. And just add in some brown on the top edge there, like so. And likewise at the back as well. So just on the top edge, and then you create a shadowed side and a colored side. What we're then going to do though is go to our colors and grab the top color in the fifth column. We'll reduce our brush size down to about that 2 or 1%, because we're going to start to get into some very small details now. So we're just going to create some kind of streaks across the top of the log. Now what this will do is that will kind of show us a much brighter side. It's going to show us a bit more definition in the log itself, or the branch. So we're just going to dash in some areas of this, creating it nice and random, but let the bottom stay quite dark. Let the brighter side sort of stick towards the top. There's some extra details like this, and maybe a few off the back as well. So it's just very quick and easy sort of details on there. We're then going to go to our colors, and we're going to get started with this color here at the very top right. And this is where we're going to really identify the brightest area. So in your colors, we're going to the top right color. We're going to our layers and we're going back to the parrot. And we're going to identify these brighter tones. So there's a few that go around the top of the head. And so we're going to make our brush size a very small 2% or a large 1. And we're just going to create some dashes on the top. Now this is where you're going to see your feathers really, really sort of come to life, because we've got all the shadow tones underneath ready to go. And now we're just adding in some streaky, beautiful, bright colors that are just making its way down here. And take a look at the bird as well. It runs down here, round the back, down this area here. It runs down in this area, continues down, and it makes its way onto some of the feathers. We will come to those in a second, but we just want to maybe identify the back area there of the other wing as well. Let that run into there. And then those colors also just make their way round here as well. So they come down the neck towards our shoulder, and then they nicely dash, 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 dash. Keep your dashes nice and separated, and they run over the top of some of those orange areas. So you can do that. You can dash, dash, dash. And then we're looking for the shapes that we've made of the feathers really, and trying to just add in some highlight on the left edge. So for example, we've got a feather here. I'm just going to go ahead and just streak in a little bit like so. That's all I'm going to do, just a very quick streak in on the top left edge of some of these feather shapes that you can identify in your work. So a little bit something like this. These ones down here too, we will add in some lighter scratches of this color, but just a few areas down here of this color, adding them, especially back here. We've got those beautiful bright tones that run round onto the back, so we'll nicely run down onto the top of some of these feathers, bringing in those blue colors. We can add in a little bit down here. We'll add in more on this one here too, and let that run up into the back. And I do need to emphasize that back a little bit more, so I'm literally going to zigzag my pen up and down there, zigzag that in. And then where we've got the sort of crown area here, I just want you to sort of create little dashes outwards and dash, 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 trying to just sort of emphasize that there's maybe a bit of light just catching on lots and lots and lots of little feathers just bundled together. Little something like this. And then lean those lines the opposite way where they all reach out from that point. So you should end up with much more vibrant colors like this on the top of some of your work. And we've got some more feathers down here that we can just bring in some little streaks to. Just a few with like a few bright tones, nothing too crazy on the ones at the bottom. And maybe I can sort of bring in a feather here and here by just creating dashes. So at this stage, it's very much changed. The design has taken a bit of a different look. We're then going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to go and grab this color here. It is the middle color in the third column from the right. And then some of these feathers here, down here, they have a little bit of a streak going on them down the middle. So the sort of spine of the feathers. So we'll just sort of bring this in, but it's not quite that brightest tone. We're just going to bring in some extra details on there. So coming down kind of the spine of some of these feathers, just a few of them, just to add in that extra little detail. I'm going to bring in a bit more of the blue from back there, and a little bit of blue from there as well, because there's a little bit of a streak there. Now taking a look at towards the bottom here, we've got some more feathers, and we kind of want to just identify these ones above a little bit more. So we're going to kind of create kind of a rounded look at the bottom of some of these feather shapes, just to sort of identify them a little bit better, and maybe even the odd little streak just up there. And then these ones down here, they're not really our focus, and I kind of want them to be a bit more sort of washed out towards the end, so don't worry about them too much. But like here, for example, we've got this bright blue edge in here of this feather. Then we've got another one just beside it. So I'm just going to sort of separate them with two blue lines there, and then another highlight that just runs across this edge here, and then this edge here too, and a streak down the middle. So keeping it quite loose with the colors really. We're not too interested in this area. We are going to go to our colors though, and we're going to grab this color here. It is the bright yellow in the middle of the third column, and we're going to be very light with just adding in some dashes here in the gold area. So just a few areas there, and maybe the odd little speck of yellow just up the back and down there too. Just a little bit more in there, keeping it very, very sort of light with that. We are then going to take a look at the face and go to our colors and go to the top color in the fifth column. Because we've only used the pinky tone, we can now emphasize the whiter areas. And if we take a look at the photograph, we've got a nice bit of white here. It runs into this nice area here. There's a little bit of extra brighter tone up here that's not quite that pinky tone. So we will do that. We'll add in some of this color here. Just in here for a moment. We have got one more brighter tone to add in, so don't worry if this isn't quite bright enough yet. Just dashing in some of this as well. Dash, dash, dash to create that nice feathery look. It's quite a light change, that one. And then changing our color, we're going to go ahead and use white. It should always be your last resort, so we're going to double tap in the top left hand corner to select white. I recommend we create a separate layer for this one though, just above our bird. And we're going to scratch in some really pretty kind of final sort of feathery details. So with our brush size maybe set to 1%, we're just going to create some like dashes in here and stuff just to separate some feathers. So a couple of dashes there. We'll maybe emphasize a brighter area on top of the beak a little bit more. Maybe a little bit around the mouth as well. In this area of the face, we want to dash, 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 dash to create that feathery look in there. So lots of dashes and mainly towards that top edge. But by creating the dashes, you will create feathery looks. We'll create some more white in behind here. Up towards the back of the eye a little bit more. And the odd little splash of the white in this area will look cool. Dash, dash, dash. A couple more in between there too. Create some really bright tones in the face. Lots of dashes. We'll add in the odd little flick on top of the green. So these are kind of artistic liberties at this point. We're adding in some fun extra highlights on top of here that are not part of the photograph, but we're just adding in that nice aesthetic look to it, which to me I think looks really cool. So a couple of dashes in here. Dash, dash, dash. A couple more down into here too. I might add another one into there. Dash, 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 dash. A couple more down here. We're going to go ahead and add in some on top of the blues. So just a couple of dashes up here, just to identify basically a few feathers that are maybe catching the light a little bit more. So just a few areas of white on top of here. Like so. And then we've got the brighter tones that we know are here. So we're just going to dash, 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 dash. As if we're trying to just catch on top of some of those feathers. We have a much brighter area down the back. So dash, dash, dash. And we've got some more feathers here, of course. So we're just going to find our shapes that we added in. Create some lovely dashes over the top of them, which are going to be your kind of brightest tones. Couple of bits like this. And then a couple down on some of these feathers. Down here will be fine. Just a few with some extra white accents in those beautiful feathery areas. Which this to me is that final step to me anyway, that makes that kind of whole look come together. It really gives the design a much more artistic flair to it. We'll add in the odd little tiny light scratches in some of these feathers. I call them scratches because they don't really take a lot of colour onto the page because they're very small. We're not adding in like chunks of colour. And then that is everything for the parrot itself. Next, what we're going to do is just try to make it look a little bit more like a watercolour painting as such. So we'll go to our layers and we'll turn off our stencil. We're not interested in that anymore. We're going to go to the bird itself and we're going to swipe it to the left and we're going to duplicate it. We're then going to go ahead and grab the bottom one out of the two. We're going to go to our adjustments and Gaussian blur and we're going to swipe this from left to right, and immediately you'll get rid of that solid line on the outside and kind of create like a bit of a bleed of colour. So you can see as I swipe from left to right, that colour does really bleed outwards. So we're going to go up to something around about that 15 to 20% mark. So I'm going to go somewhat in the middle of there, 17. And we'll go to the layer. We'll tap on it and we'll just lower the opacity down to 90%. We don't want to take away from our main subject too much. Then what we're going to do is we're going to work on the background for a second. So we'll go down to the background wash. We'll go ahead and tap on that layer and just bring that opacity down a little bit because we want the colours now of the bird to bleed and make them look really cool. So we'll bring that down to about that 65% mark. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move up to the branch, because then what we're going to do is we're going to start to make all the colours bleed a little bit more. So we're going to use a mix of our eraser and the smudge as well. So if we go to our eraser and we set it to wet sponge and the opacity set to 73% for a moment, we'll make the brush size around about that 6%. I'm going to take away a little bit of the edge of the log, likewise at the bottom right as well. And then we're going to go ahead and go to our smudge tool, tap on the smudge tool and use the wash. And the opacity set to 40% or 41. And the size is currently set to 15. I think that's a little bit too big. We'll go up to about 6. And we're just going to blend out and bleed out those colours a little bit. So if we take a look at that, it's now got this really soft look to it. We're going to bleed out the bottom as well. So we're going to push down. Now, if you push down from inside the shape, you will be able to push down a big chunk of colour like that. So you kind of want to have a balance between sort of smudging from the very edge and just pushing downwards. And likewise, you can push that up and outwards, but don't go too mad with the branch. We don't want a big lump of brown in the middle of our design. So we're just going to push that out a bit more, smudging it out, pushing that down. Should have something like this. And likewise on the end here, I'm just going to really knacker the end out of this a little bit more. So really take away from it a little something like this. Then we're going to go to our layers and go up towards the actual parrot. Now what I recommend you do is I would swipe your parrot to the left and duplicate it. turn off the top one to just have it as a backup basically, and then go to the one that's still turned on. And we're just going to start to manually smudge out some of the colours. So we'll reduce our brush size down to about sort of 3%. I'm going to push out some of the orange, and I can look at that. The second you do that, you're going to create a lot more bleed out from there. It's going to look very, very sort of artistic, much more sort of watercolory aesthetic. We can do that with the beak and whatnot. Push out a little bit of that darker tone into here, but be careful not to sort of smudge from too far inside the shape of the bird, and also not too much, especially in the darker areas, because otherwise you'll kind of really distort the look a little bit too much. I'm going to push these greens out though. I want them to really sort of push out from the top of the forehead there, pushing those beautiful green colours out. We'll do the same on the back, so we'll push out some of these blues in certain areas. They will create really nice areas of bleed down here onto the back area, where we can definitely push out some of these darker tones over here. And we're just trying to smudge that out, create that really nice watercolor kind of look to it. Try and grab some of these yellows, push them out too. And likewise down here, we really want to smudge those out, because again, I said earlier on, I'm not too interested in this area. If anything, if you want to, you can grab your eraser. We can erase this whole bottom area here. We may have to get rid of it from the layer underneath as well. And then just grab your smudge tool and just bleed them out at the bottom here. Really just let them fade out as if that's what you intended it to look like all along. And as I mentioned, you may need to go down to your layers and go down to the layer that we blurred out in the background and just erase from that, like so, and then smudge that out as well. So just smudge that out underneath, getting it nice and washed out. Really looks like it has that beautiful natural bleed of colour. And then go back to the main parrot that we're working on and bleed them colours out a bit more. So you can create something like this. You've got that nice washed look at the bottom. And then we'll take a look into here. We'll push some of the blues out into this area here too. And on the chest, I can actually go ahead and grab my eraser and just maybe define that edge a little bit better. So I'm going to reduce my brush size and just define the edge of the bird a little bit better. Get rid of that area of excess. Then go back to my smudge tool and push out those colours. So you can make those little adjustments if need to be. The bright tones, I think, look fantastic when they bleed out. They look great. And then I think a really nice sort of artistic touch that we can add onto here is we can go ahead and add some splatters. So if we go to our layers and we create a new layer, let's drag it underneath the birds, so the blurred layer as well. Then we're going to go to our brush. We'll use the Mad Splashes and we'll make our brush size around about the 4%. And then in an area that you want to add some colour to, like down here, I can just hold down and grab the colour. You want to kind of grab a darker colour, and then we'll add some splatters there. We'll go ahead and grab some brown colours, some of the logs. So grab some brown from up here as well. Add in some just little splatters of colour. The lighter you press, the smaller the blob. You don't want to add in too many, but we also want to maybe add in a couple of larger ones there. We will also go ahead and hold our finger down here and grab a nice teal and just add in a few of these blobs there. We'll definitely grab some orange. Hold your finger down on the orange areas. Grab a splash and just chuck that there. Only the one will do. I'll grab some green. Add in a splatter or two just above the top of the head. And we'll add in a bright area here on the back. I want it to be right close to the actual bird, so just a few splatters on the back area here I think would look quite nice. And maybe we grab a yellow and just give a dash back there. So once you've done that, you then want to go ahead and start to think about blurring them out a little bit more. So we'll go to our smudge tool, make sure our smudge tool is set to the wash brush, and our opacity is 41%. Brush size is about 2, you could probably go bigger. We're then going to zoom in on some of these and just give them a light wash. And you'll be able to blend them out. You'll take away some of their solid shape look to them as well, which will look really, really nice. Especially the ones that are a little bit further away. Here, for example, on the greens, if you start outside the blob, you can really take away from them and just leave the odd little splatter there that looks quite realistic. I'm going to start out here and just leave a bit of a blob there. I'm going to do the same just over here. I think brush size is fine. Let's take away some of their solidness, likewise in the browns, just circular motion on top of them. If you start on top of them and you push outwards, you'll end up making a blob. If you start outside of them and make your way in towards the blob, you'll be able to leave some of these really, I think, quite realistic blobs that have that solid edge to them still, where the water rested on the canvas. We'll add some here too. Just getting rid of them, leaving that sharper edge. And likewise the yellows. We'll get rid of them in a circular motion. You should end up with a really pretty piece like this. And just take a look, maybe just get rid of some, maybe even grab your eraser and just get rid of them. If you need to, tap on your eraser and go to the wash brush and maybe just take away some of them. We don't want it to take away from the design. That's not the point. So what we'll then go ahead and do is when you're ready to then share this to Instagram, for example, what I recommend you do is if you go to your gallery, we swipe the tutorial to the left and duplicate it. We then go to the canvas, either one of them. We go up to our actions for a moment and we'll turn off our canvas and our drawing guide. And then we can go ahead and go to canvas, crop and resize, and just bring that in from the left, right up towards that edge until you're happy with your selection. So I'm going to make mine roughly around about sort of this, and something like that will do the trick. Hit done when you're done. And if you're happy with it, you can go ahead and pinch with 2 fingers, go full screen with 4, and we end up with today's finished design. As always, please be sure to share your designs with me over on Instagram when you're done. I can't wait to see your finished results. And as always, a massive thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon who help make these videos possible. If you want to get access to my full catalogue of Patreon exclusive tutorials, your name featured in videos, sneak peeks of designs, early access to tutorials, and much, much more, hit the link in the description down below. And if you're interested in today's equipment list, as always, I'm using the Sketchboard Pro, the pen mat screen cover, and the Doudrot glove. Everything will be linked in the description. And if you liked this video, you'll probably like this one on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.